Hello, can anybody hear me? My name is John Norton. Something terrible has happened to me. I think I've lost my mind. I was on flight 5481 from Charlotte to Greenville. Nothing strange was going on, except a little bumpy on the way out. It had been a while, and I was wondering why we hadn't landed yet. It took the plane about 3 hours before we landed. As soon as we landed, I rushed to the gate because I was running late, which was weird to me at the time. No one got up from their seats or made any movement. Now I think I understand why. As soon as I got off, I saw that we were not in Greenville, but in some other town. Apparently, we had made an emergency landing, I thought, but I didn't get back on the plane. I walked on. The airport was completely empty. It must have been deserted a long time ago, because the board on the wall was not electronic and showed flights in 79. I moved on, hoping to find a place to eat in the city. The streets were deserted. Not a single passing car or pedestrian. There was a thick, heavy fog everywhere, and I could see about 5 meters, no farther. As I walked, I had the strange feeling that someone was watching me from around corners. I turned around, but saw no one. A small shiver ran through my body, and cold drops of sweat broke out on my forehead. Something very strange was going on here, I thought. There were old cars parked everywhere, old cars from the 60s and 70s. Finally, I found a run-down, average-looking store just for a town like this. Once inside, I also saw no one, neither a salesman nor any customers. But my anxiety only increased. Now it seemed to me that invisible eyes were looking at me from all sides, waiting for something from me. I went through the goods. Everything is expired. I took a package of candy and looked at the date of manufacture, 1979. I rushed to the cashier's table, and there was an old receipt lying around. It had the date stamped May 14, 1979. My legs buckled. No one had lived in this town for 34 years. I ran trotting toward the airport, forgetting my belongings in the store. Omnipresent invisible eyes followed me on my heels. The air rang in my ears, and I felt as if someone was whispering insistently in my ear. It was unbearable. I ran inside the airport and looked out the window. My heart felt like it had stopped. The plane was gone. It had taken off, leaving me alone in an empty city. I could no longer stand and collapsed to my knees. Tears streamed from my eyes, and I couldn't stop them. I knelt in the middle of the abandoned airport and cried. Then I screamed, hoping the plane would hear me and take me away from this hell. I screamed for as long as I had the strength, until I wheezed, until I had a headache. Then I finally ran out of strength, and I lost consciousness. I woke up with my body crawling on the tiles toward the exit. Something had grabbed my wrists. They were human hands, but they reeked of a terrible cold, like from a freezer. I had no strength to break free from its grip, and I lost consciousness again. When I woke up, I found myself at a crossroads. My legs did not obey me at all. My head could hardly turn. My whole body was stiff, as if I had been nailed to the road with 1,000 nails. I lay on the bare asphalt for about half an hour. Then, summoning up all my remaining willpower, I slowly got up. My legs were still cotton, and I could hardly move. I decided to find myself a car to get out. All around me were single-story houses, small in size, but there were no cars anywhere. I walked from block to block, but I never found a single car. It was as if they had all evaporated. As I walked, something started following me again from everywhere, from the windows of houses, bushes, from behind poles. Suddenly, I saw the figure of a girl appear out of the fog. I was petrified and stared at her like a zombie. She didn't even look in my direction, just ran along and soon disappeared into the fog. There was something strange about her. No, not that she was the first person I'd ever seen in this damned city. The girl was transparent, like out of the fog. I became hysterical. I ran in the opposite direction. I just ran without looking back. Meanwhile, life in the town began to stir. Cars made of fog appeared, and the same foggy ghost people sat in them. Ghosts were coming out of the houses as if they were going to work. All their empty eyes stared at me, but the ghosts continued on their way. Finally, I reached the end of the city. A sign floated out of the fog in front of me that said, "You are leaving the town of Slipstone. Have a safe journey." I couldn't run anymore, so I went slower. I must have walked for 3 hours, and the fog just wouldn't let up. It seemed to me that it was getting closer and would soon swallow me up and drag me back to that hellhole. I couldn't think about anything from hunger. It all seemed like a dream, and I was about to wake up in the comfort of a dry airplane seat. But unfortunately, it wasn't a dream. Soon, I saw another sign. I was thrown into a fever and my body was all sweaty. It read, "Welcome to Slipstone. Population 2306. I was in my third week of living in an abandoned store. The canned goods are running low. I can see them. They're outside, just standing there, looking at me, not going anywhere, probably waiting for me to let them in." I found a recording device at the local radio station, capable of transmitting a signal. It seems to work, although I can only transmit on one wave. I don't know if everything here is real, or if I'm already lying in some asylum and this is all a hallucination. I learned that these monsters can only walk in fog, otherwise they disappear. Even though I turned on the 3 fans I found here, the fog is still slowly seeping through the door crack. If anyone can hear me, get me out of here. I'm in Slipstone. I'm in Slipstone. I'm not here alone. January 8, 2003, a small Beech 19-0 turboprop passenger plane flying to Greenville, South Carolina, went left and up vertically on takeoff at 8:45 local time Wednesday before flipping over and crashing into a U.S. Airways hangar at Charlotte International Airport. Nearly all of those aboard the small passenger plane, 17 passengers and 2 crew members, died in the tragedy. 2 more people are still missing. The message was sent on a never-before-used frequency, but was intercepted by a radio amateur in North Carolina. He showed the tape to the police. An investigation was opened, and it was discovered that the town of Slipstone was not on a map of the United States. The recording was considered a joke and the case was closed. What seemed interesting about the recording, however, was that at the last minute, strange whispering sounds were heard. The forensic examination denied that the sounds belonged to a person, an animal, or were created artificially. The recording was posted on the internet on a certain site of missing persons, but a few days later it disappeared. The whereabouts of passenger John Norton on Flight 5481 have not yet been established. A fascinating story took place in 1961. An American pilot was flying over Ohio. The weather was disgusting. The plane kept diving into clouds, and in the gaps the sun was hitting his eyes. That's why when the pilot once again peeked out of the cloudy milk, he didn't immediately notice another plane a few dozen yards in front of him. Making a desperate turn, he miraculously managed to avoid the collision, but the end of his wing still grazed the side of the other plane. After landing, the pilot filed a flight incident report, which surprised the airfield authorities. The pilot described the plane he almost collided with as a single-seat biplane with cloth-covered wings and wire stretchers between them. In the open cockpit sat a pilot in a leather helmet and large conserve glasses. Experts in charge of flight safety decided that the cause of the near crash was a replica of an old plane made for the filming of a historical movie. When moving it to the place of filming, the filmmakers did not bother to get permission to fly. At that point, the incident was safely forgotten. A few months later, however, in an old and abandoned hangar at a small private airfield, a biplane exactly like the one described by the American pilot was accidentally found. The experts who examined it came to the conclusion that it was impossible to fly it. It could just crumble because of its dilapidated state. But the case was finally confused by the logbook found in the cockpit. There was a record in it, dated 1911. The pilot wrote that during his last flight he almost collided with a big silvery airplane of surprising construction, which was rushing at a great speed and brushed the end of the wing against his car. Experts did indeed find a scratch on the side of the biplane in which microparticles of paint and aluminum were left, which were exactly the same composition as the material of a modern airplane. It turned out something fantastic. The biplane not only made a 50-year chronal leap, but also returned back to its time. Like a flying phantom, a DC-4 charter plane with 57 passengers on board landed in Caracas, Venezuela, in 1996. It happened more than 40 years after the machine disappeared in 1955 during a flight from New York to Miami. Eyewitness accounts and taped conversations between the pilot and the control tower leave no doubt that this incredible story actually took place. The testimony of the airport control tower workers who saw the whole incident is largely consistent in nature, said Ramon Estevar, Deputy Minister of Civil Aviation of Venezuela. I saw the plane. I heard the pilot's voice. I even held the calendar that fell out of the airliner. But I still can't believe it, said Juan de la Corte, who saw the whole thing from his position in the flight control tower. These people on board still thought it was 1955 and that they had landed in Florida. God only knows where the passengers had been all these years. According to de la Corte and the other dispatchers, they realized something supernatural was happening when a long decommissioned propeller plane, invisible on radar screens, suddenly began approaching the airport. We asked the pilot to identify himself, and he passed on to us in turn. Where are we? His voice was frightened and confused, but he finally said he was on charter flight 914 from New York to Miami with a crew of 4 and 57 passengers aboard. After those words, the dispatcher declared it was our turn to be frightened. There was instant silence in the control room. Everyone was stunned. The destination of flight 914 was Miami, 800 kilometers from Caracas. I answered the pilot, "It's Caracas, Venezuela, South America," de la Corte says. Then, just in case, I asked, "Were you in distress?" There was no answer, and I immediately cleared the corridor for the plane to land. The landing went perfectly. The car stopped not far from the control tower. Then I heard the first pilot say to the co-pilot, "Jesus Christ, Jimmy, what the hell is that?" They must have seen the jet standing on the next runway and mistook it for a spaceship. According to de la Corte, the pilot said he was scheduled to land at Miami International Airport at 9:55 a.m. on July 2, 1955. Then I heard him say, "Something's not right here." I radioed the plane, "Captain, this is Caracas International Airport. Today is May 21, 1996. He only exclaimed, "Oh my God." You could hear the man panting heavily. I tried to calm him down, telling him that a ground team was on its way to them. According to de la Corte, as the ground crew approached the plane, the pilot shouted over the radio, "No, don't come any closer. We're getting out of here." The ground crew later reported seeing passengers' faces pressed up against the portholes. The pilot opened his cockpit window ajar. He was waving some kind of stick. De la Corte said, apparently a small 1955 calendar fell out of it, which we later discovered. The pilot started the engines and the plane took off again. Only a few minutes passed after